and welcome to today's episode of the National Home Improvement Podcast series sponsored by HIES. And this episode is all around the importance and benefits for small businesses of collaboration in the home improvement and domestic repair, maintenance and improvement sector, especially those that work in the glazing area. And the episode is very much around how we can empower collaboration in the solar industry. I'm your host, Anna Scothan, Chief Executive of the National Home Improvement Council. And as I said, this series of episodes within the NHIC podcast is sponsored by HIES Consumer Scheme. And this episode focuses on collaboration. Our special guests are Jonathon Moorhouse from HIES and Jack White from Segen. Hello to you both.
Hi Jack.
Hi Jonathan, sorry.
It's all right. I get John quite a lot. You know, people do exactly what you've just done. They can't help themselves, but they want to say John all the time.
Yeah.
I've got to a point now at 32 years of age where I'm thinking, no, it's not John. And I go, do you know what? Maybe I'm slipping into that name now. Maybe that's where, maybe that's where I'm going with it.
As you're maturing into it.
That's it, yeah. I've come from Johnny, and now I'm slowly getting older into losing my Y.
Okay, well, Jonathan, would you mind taking just a minute or two to introduce yourselves and HIES to the listeners today?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, first of all, for having me on board. This is the second podcast, obviously, I've done with you now, and the first one went down huge success. So I was obviously really excited to be back on with you. So, yeah, Jonathon Moorhouse. I am the head of business at HIES Consumer Code from QA Scheme Support Services. My role within HIES is essentially it's to drive the commercial and the business side of things. So I have a small team that sit underneath me, and within our team and within the actual consumer code side of things, it's a big part, and HIES is there as a big part of driving industry standards, really. That's the consumer code side of it, and my role is obviously to drive the commercial and the business side of it within the consumer code.
Great, thank you so much for that overview. And Jack, could you introduce yourself and Segen to our listeners, please?
Yeah, so my name is Jack White, and I work for a company called Segen, who are actually the largest distributors of renewable products within the UK market. And we also operate on a global scale as well as part of a wider group. So we operate in Germany and South Africa with Segen, and we've also got a sister company in America called Segen, also focused on renewables distribution. So as a group, they are a multi-billion-pound group, Segen forming a significant part of that within the UK. My role with Segen is head of business development. So I've been with Segen for about 4 years and have worked a number of different roles within the sales function. The primary focus of that has been kind of onboarding new customers and welcoming new installers into the industry. So this collaboration piece really ties in with what we've been working on and what I've been working on in Segen as well.
Yeah, brilliant. That's great. Thank you. And how long have Segen been in the solar industry in the UK? And solar, obviously it's been going on for a long time, but I think that people's understanding of it has changed over that time.
No, absolutely. So Segen we're actually celebrating our 20th year of operating this year. So they've been in the industry for a very long time now doing what we do. And within that, there's very much the understanding, I think everybody calls it the solar coaster, where there's various elements within that are very difficult to navigate as the industry goes up and down along that solar coaster. And we've been able to navigate that successfully for the past 20 years. And that is a big part of what we try and do in collaboration with our customer base to make sure that is navigated with them.
Yeah, and it's really important for anyone thinking of getting solar added to their property and starting on this journey that you find reputable companies to work with, and one's, as you say, solar was the solar coaster. I've never heard that before, but that's brilliant. But it was really attractive when there were large feed-in tariffs and incentives from government. It attracted all sorts to the market, and you can end up with a bit of a boom and bust. But companies like Segen that have been around, that have shown that test of time, that have properly invested in their staff and in their technologies and all of that, that's really important, isn't it, for people to be able to trust who they're working with?
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as we don't have a direct relationship with that end user of the product, what we do have is a very extensive NPI process for any of the products that we list. And we are relatively selective about the type of clients that we work with as well. And we don't like opening up accounts for people that we see as a potential risk of that quick book and exit the market kind of setup, which we have seen in the past. So we do stand behind who we work with. Yeah.
Great stuff. That's brilliant. Thank you. And so what are some of the challenges that the solar industry has faced historically, and I think is facing now? I guess especially around that unpredictability of the supply chain.
Yeah, and that has been a consistent factor throughout Segen's whole operation, and particularly in the last 4 years as we have seen hyper growth in the market happening, and that is something that Segen is really, really focused on. So with us having a global presence, what that allows us to do for our customers is give surety of supply where it's feasible. So obviously we can't 100% guarantee that every single product will be available, but with our supply chain processes and the purchasing reach that we have as a global group, we are in a really good position with our manufacturers to be almost driving demand rather than reacting to it.
Yeah, brilliant. And Jonathon, how do HIES support your members in navigating some of these industry challenges that they might face?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a two-parter, really. The first part of that is on the consumer code side of things, so the compliance side of things, making sure and ensuring that they are first and foremost adhering to that consumer code that we set out many years ago now, and that is ever evolving and changing as regulation sort of goes on. So that is the main part of what we do, is to ensure, like I said, that end user is positively affected by these companies adhering to the consumer code that we've got. But secondly, which is how sort of mine and Jack's relationship built a few years ago now, is, well, pretty much actually the title of the podcast, it is a collaboration effort. We've been known to be called organ grinders. And what that is obviously we have, so many members now that are constantly looking for some business support. But in this, the solar coaster industry that we are in, which is new, it's fresh, it can be daunting at times. That's probably one of the most used words that I hear quite a lot, is daunting, minefield. When they are entering into that sector, the majority of Jack's customers, and the same with ours and our members, are ex-electricians, or they've come from one different industry into this industry. And, I had a conversation the other day about how if something went wrong with an installation, with a normal rewiring or a mother unit or something like that in an electrical world, you could have 20 electricians to your door within an hour for a call out for £100, for example, and you'd have no problem. I keep forgetting, because I'm in the industry, obviously, 8 days of the week, I keep forgetting how actually niche solar is to electrical engineers. So if something was to go wrong with an installation and you do need a call out or something like that, you don't have 20 engineers to your house within the hour. You've got one that might take a couple of weeks, depending on which area you're in, obviously. But sort of to tie it back round, the collaboration side of things is, we obviously see a lot of installers, look at 2022, for example, Jack, when, the back end of COVID, you had China that was in the state it was. Mm-hmm. Battery storage systems were like gold dust, and it was a case of, who can I ring so I can get hold of this battery storage system that I promised someone, 6 weeks ago. And it was a case of people constantly calling us because they knew if they'd call us, we've got the relationships with people like Jack and other suppliers and manufacturers and things like that, where we can sort of collaborate and organ grind those conversations to say, listen, I really need your help with this one. I've got an installer. And that's the biggest point, really, where we've evolved our offering to the installers in terms of a collaboration aspect.
Great. And one thing that you mentioned, I just wondered if you could just touch on slightly, is the consumer code that you have at HIES. I mean, this isn't a podcast about the consumer code, but I think it might be quite interesting to just explain to listeners in a nutshell what that consumer code entails and why having installers that sign up to that is a positive thing that people should be looking for. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So the general and generic answer to this is the HIES consumer code is a CTSI approved consumer code. It's one of two consumer codes that work within the renewable sector, both ourselves and RECC, that one enormously help contribute towards MCS certification. At this current moment, MCS stipulate you have to have a consumer code there. But the consumer code itself, as I mentioned, we gained consumer code status in 2015, and it was largely driven off the back of us seeing companies shut down, close down, rise from the ashes, phoenix, and they do all that side of things. And what we've done is we've taken those experiences, those learnings, and those unfortunate events to combine them into a positive atmosphere where we can drive installers to not go down that road. So the consumer code that we set out, as I mentioned, it's available on the website, it's available on all of our T's and C's and things like that you can see. It's really there to show the end user that when buying from an installer who is a HIES member, that they can buy with trust, confidence, and peace of mind. They are fully backed. One, in the first instance, if something was to go wrong with the installation, we are putting our rubber stamp on these installers to us say that this installer will go back out and carry out that remedial work as part of the workmanship guarantee. But in the very unfortunate event that something was to go wrong and the installer is no longer there, which obviously, we have seen it now quite numerous times. We had quite a high profile one within the last sort of 18 months. It's obviously not great when an installer goes out of business because there's going to be homeowners that are left out of pocket, left in real problems. But on a positive spin, being the ever optimist that I am, it really gives us a chance to show who we are and what we can do and deliver on the back end of the insurance back guarantee and helping with remedial works and helping with the dispute resolution. When the customer turns around and says, my installer's gone bust, I don't know who to speak to, where do I go? They come to us and we can really put the mind at rest. So that in a nutshell is the consumer code. There is a million other benefits that I could sit here. I mean, you've heard them yourself, and God knows how many times now, but it's so important for listeners to realise that not all installers are equal. And installers that do go that extra mile and sign up to things like consumer codes, that do make sure they've got insurance back guarantees in place, that do make sure that their staff are well trained and that they're using reputable products that comply with the necessary regulations in the UK. They're all important things that a homeowner should be thinking about when they're making this decision and who to collaborate with themselves on their project. And Jack, I wonder if I can just bring you in there and think about the importance of having a stable supply chain in this process, because with lots of challenges that a global economy and the world has had recently. I know we're 3 years on from COVID, but we've had Brexit, we've had COVID, we have the terrible conflict in Ukraine, we have the issues in Gaza. Materials are short, resources are short, and it is important to know where your materials are coming from, to understand and have that strong, stable supply chain. And that's where organisations like Segen come in, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And I think when we look back at 2022 through that period of hypergrowth, which was ultimately brought on by the Ukraine conflict, that was a real learning period for the industry as a whole, because we need to recognise that in the grand scheme of things, the renewables industry is still relatively young. And with that comes unstable supply. And none of the manufacturers were ready for that level of hyper growth that we hit. Whereas now, coming out of the back of it, there has been real learnings put in place from that around wanting a sustainable supply and demand model rather than trying to aim for hyper growth. So as a business, we obviously experienced that hyper growth, and it was amazing when it happened, but there was a lot of issues off the back of it.
Yeah.
And we now recognise actually the aim should be sustainable growth, not aiming for that hyper growth, because it doesn't do the industry any good at all. So we turned off new business as a function for about 12 months at the time, because we recognised that if we just kept adding to the pot, it was only going to make the problem worse. So we just took a decision to stop doing that altogether. And now, out of the back of it, we've now got a very sustainable model in terms of supply and demand, albeit with some fluctuations. So yeah.
Yeah, of course, and it is vital that you have that sort of realistic approach to things, and demand is only going to increase because as you said, the solar industry is still quite young, but it has matured, and I think the technology surrounding it has matured. So battery storage has more come online, electric vehicle charging, connecting that whole system together is come online and is more accessible for people now. And the ability for technology and smart metering to help people understand it, and even the mobile phone apps that most people monitor their usage and collection from, and energy companies coming on stream in terms of purchasing supply, so that householders now, I'd still say it's new, but it's more normal for consumers to understand that they can be a prosumer now. So I think all of the stakeholders have been on a journey with solar, and it does feel as though now there is stability and a solid foundation, and there's evidence of organisations that can be trusted and relied upon, and that growth coming forwards is, as you've said, a sustainable growth.
Yeah, and I think that's ultimately where it's going to come down to over the next kind of 12, 18, 24 months. Is we want growth, but it needs to be done in the right way now. Because there are still going to be fluctuations in supply and demand, because even we look at the issue surrounding the Red Sea at the moment, that means that all of the container ships have been diverted around the south of South Africa. So that puts a strain on the supply chain, and there are some products coming into shortage positions at the moment. However, with our global presence and our purchasing ability, we're able to mitigate that.
Yeah, brilliant. And so what work do you do to support installers and your suppliers? If you just kind of explain where Segen sits in the supply chain, and then also talk about kind of how you've been working through things like your online portal and things like that, but how it helps and empowers installers, and that therefore then allows them to empower and support their customers, the homeowner.
Oh, absolutely. So I think the resources we have available within Segen are invaluable to both existing customers and new entrants to the market as well. And if we were to look at that new entrant to the market piece, which is where a lot of the focus is at the moment, the tools we have, so things like our online portal where people do all of their quoting and purchasing, there's various design tools available on there, and the amount of information on there around the product, so historic and upcoming webinars direct from the manufacturers, all of the product data sheets and install manuals and everything are available on there. So it really does become a one-stop shop for people to upskill themselves within the industry and learn more about the products that they're selling and installing. And then alongside that, we are very forward-facing in the industry. So we run a lot of kind of Segen-specific events in conjunction with our kind of strategic manufacturing partners. So in the form of road shows and installer training events around the country. And all of our marketing is focused towards that as well. And then upcoming in the next couple of months, we are in the process of launching what we're calling the Segen Academy, which will run out of our new warehouse facility in Medway. And that's in conjunction with City College, and we will be offering fully accredited solar PV, battery storage and EV charging courses within that facility. Because we ultimately want to be able to not only grow our share within the market through some of these initiatives, but really work with the industry as a whole to help grow the industry fully. Because if we look at some of the targets that the government have in place around renewable energy, the current resource in the industry is going to be very, very stretched to be able to hit those targets. So we need to be able to be working with that to help grow the overall market as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really interesting point there that you make around engaging, that for installers to engage with their suppliers so that they can understand the innovations that the suppliers have been working on, because a lot of suppliers are really innovating in this space. And they want to train you to be able to install their products and to be able to talk about their products to your customers. What are the types of things that you do at Segen on that?
So, I mean, for a start, we run consistent online webinars with our strategic manufacturers, which our installer base can sign up to free of charge and attend. They will be recorded and put as a resource on the website as well. We do a lot of in-person training with the manufacturing partners as well. So taking them to various areas around the country in conjunction with us and inviting as many of our customers as we can to come and attend that. Because ultimately, I mean, there are always commercial goals towards these things. However, we recognise that if you are training people and showing that loyalty and that ability to upskill them, then they're more likely to use you as a preferred supplier moving forward, which is ultimately what we want. And when we look at Segen alongside our sister company within the UK, which is City Electrical Factors, we're both owned by the same parent company. They're obviously a very established electrical wholesaler in the industry. And I think they've got something like 60,000 electricians signed up to them as customers who aren't currently working within renewables. That is a massive base that as a partnership, we can work with them and use this training academy and use their own training facilities. And a big part of that conversation is around the benefits of having a consumer code such as HIES or REC and going down the MCS certification base to give themselves that credibility and the backing within the industry that therefore the end user can have confidence in them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's important as well. And I was really excited to hear about your Segen Academy at City College, because it's you're as an organisation putting something back to the industry and helping people get trained, reskill, upskill. So Jonathon mentioned earlier about, you might have 50 electricians locally, but not very many solar. But electricians might be starting to get questions and inquiries from people that have had solar installs in their area around repairs or even installs or tweaks, modifications, etc. So it's important for them to know where to go to get training, or that more facilities exist around the country for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some really good training providers already in the industry doing that. However, there's not enough. And I'd say that the vast majority of the incoming inquiries receive about opening an account with us are not companies that have just formed purely as renewable companies and are brand new. They're existing electrical contractors and plumbing and heating contractors who have started to get those inquiries from their customer base saying, look, we're interested in solar. Are you able to do it? And therefore they're going, right, how do we do this? How do we start offering that rather than subcontracting it or passing it on to another company? And that's where it becomes really key to be able to step in and offer that support from day one for them.
Absolutely. And Jonathan, I was just about to bring you in, Jonathan. I think because there's an opportunities as well for installer companies to grow, to still do their electrical work, but to maybe take on an apprentice or partner, collaborate with another, or to take on staff and specialize in solar in your area. And are you seeing some of your members looking at those opportunities?
Yeah, massively so, actually. Jack, I was just going to ask you then, going back to 2022. So, just for those listening and hopefully watching, not whilst you're driving, but for those who are listening and people thinking, yeah, I remember 2022 very well. For those who were in the solar, I say were for a very good reason, but for those who have been in solar now for a good few years, we all remember the feed-in tariff days. We all remember getting paid 45 pence, per unit. And even like my mum now, she's still getting feed-in tariff payments, and she still winds me up about it to this day, because I get 5.5p on the SEG and she's getting 28.5p. And she still likes to wind me up, thinking she would think I would have a way better understanding of how to get more money. But in 2022, which was for me the peak solar year since probably 2016, 2017, we saw an inordinate amount of inquiries coming through from newly formed companies. So we use Credit Safe as our sort of credit backing system, if you will, to do our checks and things. And that's the first thing that we look at when we start accrediting these companies. How long they've been trading, how many CCJs have they got, credit history, etc., etc. And back then, you could easily say 8 out of 10 inquiries that came in were newly formed companies. And don't get me wrong, it was a big mixed bag of people looking to make a quick buck, because that's how capitalism works. They see an opportunity and they want to make money. And then we saw, good, honest companies, which still to this day are thriving and doing extremely well. And, all customers of yours as well, Jack. But what I was going to ask you then, just listening to your talk, because you mentioned, and which is the same as what we're getting now, we get a lot. The majority of the inquiries that come through now, the majority are companies that have been trading for 2 or more years. They are ABC electrical contractors. They are Jack White, Electrical Sparks Limited. Whereas back then it was ABC Solar, ABC Renewables.
Yeah.
And what I was going to ask you then, Jack, is have you seen a huge transition from a lot of new companies trying to come into the sector, as to now the majority of the companies are, as I mentioned, already in the electrical world, and they're just sort of diversifying their own company?
Yeah, we have seen that a lot. So there are fewer newly formed businesses coming in and asking us for an account at the moment. It still happens, but I'd maybe say 2 out of 10 at the moment. And I'd say gladly, the majority of inquiries coming in now are either already BASE or REC and MCS certified, or they're working towards it and it's in their pipeline of things to sort out. It still forms a big part of the conversation we have with a new customer is, have you got a consumer code? Are you MCS certified? If not, are you going to be working towards that? If not, why? And trying to encourage that. And we're very good at talking about the benefits of that, even down to the fact that there's certain products within the market where you need that to be able to purchase and install them and become certified as an installer. But yeah, that definitely has been a shift. 2022, I'd almost rather forget to a degree, because it was fairly
too busy.
Yeah, it was fairly manic, and there was a lot of challenges through that period and a lot of repair work afterwards. But yeah, that has been a big shift. That's been a big shift.
And
Thank
I think.
you. Oh, sorry.
Anna, I was just realising I've not answered your question. I'd just got into asking Jack something. I told you this would happen when you get us on a conversation. In answer to your question, in terms of how, are we seeing companies looking to move into and diversify themselves? Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, the majority of my conversations now are with electrical contractors who have recently just passed their MVQ level 3 in solar installations and things like that. But along with Melody, obviously, who you know very well within our marketing team, we are looking later on in this year to launch quite a large program in terms of taking an electrical engineer, or even in the air source world, if you take a gas engineer or something like that, someone with zero training, zero experience within the renewable sector. And we are basically looking to put certain things in place, again, the Segen Academy being one of them, where we will take someone directly off the street, so to speak, and sort of plonk them into the renewable sector in the middle of it with all these different sort of stakeholders and support arms, and effectively grow them into, an evolving renewable installation company. Because, you touched on it earlier, Jack, we're miles off net carbon zero, in terms of the goals and the ambitions that were set out, years ago now. If we were to carry on at the rate we're going now, I don't even think we'd get 50% of the way there. So I think, we had quite a passionate conversation about this last time, in terms of the SMEs, within each industry, in my opinion, are the ones who are responsible for driving the growth of that sector. So, I by no means, shape or form do I call myself a subject matter expert, but for someone who's in a favourable position to make changes that I am, and especially Jack, the way you are, and Anna, definitely the way you are too, we have a duty and obligation to really drive this sector. And I think, this podcast series that you've got going on at the moment is really to raise awareness, not just for installers to come into the game, or upscale and diversify themselves, but also how to just better yourself as an organisation. Because, there's the different podcasts, obviously, we spoke about prior, is once you are in the game, which sometimes is the hardest thing, but my opinion is the hardest thing is to stay in the game. Once you are here, once you've got your qualifications, and I've done all my good stuff on the front end, and I've passed you over to Jack, and Jack's done all his good stuff, is how does then Jack's account managers deal with those installers down the line? How do our membership executives, Kurt and Gemma and Jess, how do they deal with our installers down the line? And the idea is we've got different member benefits to try and grow that company sort of from within to out. So yeah, we are seeing a lot now of installers that are coming in, diversifying themselves, that are looking at different options as to how they can sort of grow.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really exciting about home improvement generally, but I would say probably more so in the renewable space, is that it's super attractive to younger entrants and people that are thinking school leavers, thinking what type of career do they want? They want to, be their own boss. They want to, have a sustainable revenue stream, sustainable income, but also that they want to be part of the green economy, that they want to do something. They have that sustainability drive that possibly Gen Xers don't necessarily have as much of. And I think home improvement, especially decarbonisation focused home improvement, is a really exciting space. And especially I think the solar and the renewable side will be more immediately attractive for new entrants. Is that something that you're seeing with the academy and the work that you're doing at Segen, Jack?
That will definitely form part of it, yeah. And I think once it's up and running, we would very much want to be getting out into the community and getting the industry at the forefront of people's minds. Because I think there's maybe a perception with some of the older generations where it's almost seen as a quick win industry. You get in, you get out, and you're done. Whereas what we're seeing now is, because it's not, the industry growth isn't purely based on government incentive. It's not purely based on people getting this feed-in tariff and there's a cut-off point for it. It's been done for the right reasons now. And some of that is purely economics. Like the maths of a solar system currently add up versus energy prices. So if people have got the money available, it makes sense as an investment for them. But equally, it's starting to be done for the really right reasons, which is that decarbonisation and that target that we're looking at. So the industry is in a really good position that if you get in it early, you're going to have a really long and very fulfilling career out of it.
Absolutely.
So that puts us in a really good position to be driving younger people into the industry and getting them trained up, getting them in a sustainable position, and supporting them moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a really interesting thing that you put there in that this is a 20, 30, 40, 50-year industry that's just starting to come in. And so it really is sustainable careers for people where people can make good livings and contribute to positive environment, climate change issues, which I think are very important. But I just want to bring us on to discuss the importance of innovation in the solar industry. And I mentioned earlier about kind of all of the moving parts and the fact now that electric vehicles are much more accessible and battery storage is more accessible and more reliable now. But how important would you say, Jonathon, is HIES's role in supporting that innovation and helping people understand and installers understand those innovations?
Yeah, it's one of the most important things. We've all heard the age-old saying, do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always had. And I think the solar industry now, the renewable sector itself we've not scratched the surface. We've not scratched the surface, and I politically bang on all the time about school curriculums and things like that, but I have a 5-year-old son, Noah, and we're expecting one on the way, by the way. Obviously, you didn't know that last time we spoke.
Congratulations.
So, yeah, we're adding another boy to the crew, so she's going to be extremely overrun, unfortunately, but that's not my problem. By the time they're leaving school, so in Noah's instance, that'll be 11 years, which is now terrifying. I really wish I hadn't said that out loud. But by the time they're leaving school, installations of solar and solar training courses probably will be the norm, and you remember, my dad always said when I was leaving school, get yourself a trade, you'll never be out of work, get a trade, become a plumber or a bricklayer or a sparky, you'll never be out of work. And the more I think about that now as to back then, it couldn't have been more right. Now, getting my hands dirty and picking tools up myself was never on the cards for me, because I'm blessed with a voice to be able to talk to people. So I don't do it as much as much as my older brothers did. But these guys who are going to be leaving school over the next few years, like you said, Jack, with your Segen Academy, you've got City College there. We work with Griff Thomas at GTech, obviously, a friend of ours, Jack. These guys now who have what you said earlier, that future modern way of thinking, they are going to be making that sort of entrance into the solar industry at the ages of 16, 17 and work experience and things like that extremely attractive now. And when in terms of innovations, I think we're in a sandbox. We are in a sandbox as we speak for any installers to go out there, come out with different things. I'm not sure, Jack, if you know Jake Finley over at Lux. Yeah, Jake's a good friend of mine, known him many, many, many years. And so I've got a neighbour's dog who doesn't seem best pleased. I don't know if that came through. He came out with the Lux product, a good few years ago, which we actually, as HIES, accredited the actual product itself. So still to this day, it was the only HIES accredited product ever. And I'd like to think we played a very large role in assisting Jake through his entire journey of getting that, that Lux battery and an inverter sort of to the market. And for those that are listening that know Jake, he is a boffin, and he's extremely passionate when it comes to the actual solar the solar sector itself and coming up with new funky ideas. But for us, what we want to do is we want to encourage people to be what they want to be. And that sounds so cliche and maybe corny in a certain way, but when their business is in our hands at some point, and it really, really is, and they're asking, Johnny, which way do we need to go with our business? Do we go left? Do we go right? Do we jump up? We always say, have you thought of anything new? Have you added EV chargers Have you looked at air source heat pumps? Have you looked at employing people to do the air source heat pumps and diversifying yourself? And, where do you want to go with this? Because you mentioned, I think I saw someone who put something on LinkedIn yesterday. Solar has now gained itself into an irreversible tipping point. I can't remember where I wrote that, who wrote that. So forgive me if I can't reference it. But it was said that solar's got itself to an irreversible tipping point now, where, unlike air source heat pumps at this current moment, with the hydrogen on the horizon and sort of like peeking over the fence, solar now has pretty much been confirmed that it will be the electrical source going forward, definitely for at least our days, anyway. And obviously, with the air source heat pump side of things, hydrogen boilers are still knocking on that door. I'm a massive advocate of air source heat pumps, by the way. Don't go to hydrogen, but that's just my take. And I think what we're trying to do with HIES is we are really trying to open a lot of doors for the installers to navigate themselves into things that they maybe didn't even know existed. So when they do come across and trip over it, they can really look at themselves and go, this suits us so much better for something that we never even knew was there.
Yeah, so, absolutely. And I think there's an opportunity as well for installers to start offering that that sort of I don't want to say whole house, but kind of that project management role as well. If you're an expert in the solar element and the getting that it can connect into those other things. But Jack, I just wanted to bring us on to your open solar software. And how does that fit into this picture?
So I think when we're looking at innovation, I think this is very much an industry where if you stand still, you just get left behind incredibly quickly. And over the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months, we've seen a lot of new entrants come into the market in terms of within our space, within the distribution space. So electrical wholesalers trying to get a piece of the pie within the market, and rightly so. And with that, we recognise that we need to keep moving forward with our innovation as well. So part of that has been this partnership we've set up with Open Solar, who are they operate globally as a solar design software tool. Although having said that, if they heard me say design software, they'd probably not be too happy because it's a project management and design software tool. My wife happens to work for them, so she will tell me off if I get that wrong. And that can be, if people engage with it properly, it will be a complete game changer for not only existing installers, but particularly for new entrants to the market. Because as a project management tool, the amount of stuff it does leading into like the HIES REC and MCS certifications even is astronomical, and it automates a massive chunk of that for the installer.
Yeah.
So as soon as they engage with a customer, it allows them to build a 3D model to show what the project will look like once it's completed. But more importantly, it automates all of the generation calculations, return on investment calculations. There's finance options are built into it, which I think is going to be really key moving forward, because I think we will hit a ceiling at some point where capital available for people is going to be a blocker for this solar industry. There's only a handful of people who have 5, 10, 15,000 pounds sat in their bank ready to invest on a rooftop solar install. So having finance options available that work within the framework of that calculation is going to be essential, and Open Solar will build that into that as well. And Segen are also looking at what we can do to support that side of it. So once Open Solar is fully launched and fully up and running, which we believe will be within the next kind of 2 to 6 weeks, we expect that is going to have a massive impact on how our installers operate.
Fantastic. Well, it's interesting you mentioned about it, because I want to move us on to some questions that we've had from listeners.
Okay.
One of the questions, actually, Jack, is about your open solar software. And this is a question from listener Alan in the Midlands. And he says, how accessible is your open solar software going to be? Is it a website, or are you going to be having an app? How are they going to be able to access it?
So it's a website, and it is a mobile and tablet app as well. So it is very accessible. So it allows installers to almost sit there with an iPad with their customer and build it whilst they're having that conversation. And one of the key things to mention about it as well is the way they operate. They've made it completely free of charge for the installer to be using. So they generate revenue through other avenues to maintain that as a free of charge service for the installer, which I think in itself is incredibly innovative, because there are other things in the market that do a similar job to Open Solar, but they are all chargeable services. And when, particularly if somebody's new into the market, they're maybe not at the point where they've got that capital available to be investing in that design software. And the whole premise of it is it makes it as easy as possible for a new installer to design and get everything right and be MCS compliant at the end of it. And as a new market entrant, that is absolutely invaluable, because we all know what red tape can be like, and particularly when you're navigating it for the first time. The more you can automate from that, the better it's going to be, and the better it is for the end user as well, because they can be sure that what they're getting is right.
Great, thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Okay.
And another question actually for you, and then I do have a question for both of you, but another one for you, Jack. And it connects to something we were talking about earlier on in the podcast. And this is from Stephen from the Southeast. He's not yet plugged into your online portal, but he wants to know what sort of support can installers expect from plugging in. It really is looking at, what's in it for him, and is it going to be worth it?
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, for a start, just having an account with us, even without access to the portal, would be very beneficial. So, unlike a lot of the people distributing within the industry, this is all we do. So, the expertise we hold within the business are second to none, really. So, everybody you talk to, particularly customer-facing people within Segen, will know what they're talking about and be able to guide you towards the right products. So not only would your account manager be able to do that, but we do have a specific technical team in place as well. And we are the only distributor in the UK to have that. So rather than trying to navigate direct communication with a lot of manufacturers, which can be challenging at times because of the nature of the industry. A lot of them are Chinese-based manufacturers. We can take a lot of that off their hands. In terms of access to the portal, as a new entrant particularly, just the wealth of information available on there for you. So we have everything on there we've got a series on there called Back to Basics, which is very basic. It covers the fundamentals of PV and goes through bit by bit on each individual product set. So the panels, the mounting kits, battery storage, inverters. So it covers off the basics of that, which I know personally, sometimes that's where I come across a bit of a blocker, is I can understand the more complicated element of something, but until I actually understand the basics, I struggle to move on with it. And that is invaluable for people coming on. And if they were then to link it onto the Open Solar software as well, that overall package becomes really easy for people to navigate with. You don't need to know too much about solar to get started, as long as you're using those right softwares.
Great. Well, hopefully that makes it attractive for Stephen and he decides that he wants to convert into the.
We'll see. I'll keep an eye out.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. So a question for both of you. So maybe Jonathan, if you could think about asking this one first. What would you say, sorry, is the biggest misconception about working in the solar industry?
There's obviously a few, because it's so unknown. Like Jack said, we're so new into this sector, and even though 10 years, 15 years has flown by, we're onto a long road and marathon with this. I think the one thing that I would say from comments I've read, and you know who you are, you know exactly who you are. The comments that I would like to address on this is around the regulations and the standards of the actual sector itself. That's the biggest one. As I mentioned, you've got your consumer code there, where we will hold companies to such a high standard and ensure that they work to and maintain, those standards and practices that we've set out. But in terms of the regulations and everything that's been set out, you've got MCS, you've got Flexior, you've got all those bodies out there, and even the likes of the suppliers and manufacturers, they will still hold installers to a very, very high accountability before anyone else starts jumping in with these things. But I think the biggest one is around regulations and the standards of it. You can't breathe heavy in this industry without one of the policing bodies sort of hear about it and know what's going on. And it's not a case of coming down hard with a hammer. It's not that whatsoever. We're not here to provide that red tape. We're not here to tell you all the things that you're doing wrong. We are here to essentially guide you along the way to making sure that in order for you to be a successful company, there are rules and regulations you do have to follow. That's what we're there for. We're there to help you get along those, not skirt along the sides, not bend the rules, not go through the grey areas as people do. But I think I spent some time with a solar company about a year ago now. I spent 4 days with them, and the idea of it was to live and breathe their day-to-day life of what does almost like we see in YouTube, a day in the life of sort of thing. And the biggest thing that I took away from those 4 days was to how many of the little things got away from them because they were so focusing on going after the complex and the finer details that, kind of like what Jack said, really, they've just missed so many of the fundamentals, and not through any wrongdoing, not through being rogue or being a cowboy, because this is one of the nicest people I've genuinely ever met in my entire life, but just from being so busy. They miss the regulations, they miss that side of things, and that's what we're there for. That's what the industry is really sort of shaping up, really, to make sure that you do adhere to the regulation and do adhere to making sure it's safe. Because at the end of the day, electric goes bang. So it's we want to make sure that one, no one gets hurt, but two, that things are being done the right way.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jonathan. And Jack, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions that you hear from people about working in the solar industry?
So I'd say one of them I think I touched on briefly earlier around the bit of a conception that or perception, that it's a in and out industry and it's not a long-term sustainable way of making money. And I think that is hopefully changing as we're seeing more sustainable growth within the market. And another one, definitely, it's just around the complexity and how difficult it is to do. And I think if we can get the message out to market that actually, if you have qualifications, you're an existing electrician, plumber, heating engineer, it's not as complex as you think to move across and start offering this to your customers. There will be a lot of businesses out there who get asked about solar PV and just pass it on to somebody else or subcontract it. And what we want to be doing through the initiatives we're doing, like exhibiting at the installer show, that's a big focus for us on that exhibition. Because it's not primarily based on solar PV installers, the installer show. It's very heavily focused on that heating and plumbing sector. Yes. And we want to be there to talk to people about how easy it can be to move across, and showcasing some of the support, the Segen Academy, the open solar software. So they'll be there with us doing some demonstrations on what their software can do, and ultimately showing that it's not actually as complex as people think.
Brilliant. And one, it's not as complex as the installers might think. So when their customers do say to them, I'm thinking about having solar, it would be fantastic if they said, that's awesome, I can help you with that, rather than don't want to worry about, don't do that, let's just stick with what we know. So, but also Absolutely. That it's not as complex for the homeowner, because they're going to be really nervous, as you said, around financing. Either people have got the money but they still want it to be spent in a way that they feel confident about. And if they have had to take out finance, again, it needs to, you need to feel in a strong and knowledgeable position. And I say this every single episode of the podcast that I do. It's really important for homeowners, for listeners, to make sure that they've got knowledge about what they're doing, and that there are good companies out there that want to help you, want to support you. Make sure that your installer is properly accredited, that they're members of competency schemes and consumer codes, that they have their insurance back guarantees, that not all installers are equal, sadly, in the UK. And it's important as a homeowner, the end user, the consumer, that you take your responsibilities seriously in terms of making sure that you understand who you are getting in to work on your home, and that work gets done properly. But if you want it, and I think more and more people are going to start saying that not only do they want it, but they need it, there are reputable installers out there just ready to work with you. And there are companies like Segen and like HIES Consumer Code that can point you in the right direction for where to find these good installers if you're not able to find them yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. That, Anna, is, we have a heat map, and a lot of companies that are in our sort of position do, in terms of what installers are where. And one of my colleagues, Kurt, pulled it up the other day, and it was bizarre to think that realistically there's no further than sort of 25 miles between each company that we've got on our books. And that's not to say that's exact. It's to say, like, more on an average. It's roughly around about 25 miles, and that's from sort of the tip of Scotland all the way down. And we've got companies in the Shetland Islands, so I really hope they don't have any issues, because that's a long way for us to go if we've got problems. But I think, for homeowners,
nice trip.
It will be a nice trip. Yeah, it'd be cold, but it'd be a nice one. But for homeowners, it's you hear it all the time, and it still rings ever true. Get your 3 quotes. If you are paying on credit card, or if you have the option to pay on credit card, do so. You are protected by Section 75. So you have got sort of like triple indemnity there, obviously, with your insurance back guarantees, the workmanship guarantee, and obviously the credit card and finance provider as well. But yeah, just do your diligence. It's have a look into what solar is, because again, you mentioned, Jack, earlier, at this current climate, as of right now, it makes sense to get solar versus energy bill prices. It does. It's not to say it won't do in 6 months' time or a year's time, because it might not. But it's that number itself there. For someone like myself, it makes perfect sense to have solar on the house, and we have, who used a very HIES reputable installer. But it makes perfect sense for us to do it because of our annual consumption. We use a lot, so we need to generate a lot. For people who aren't using a lot and aren't generating a lot, if they're out of the house all the time, whatever, then it doesn't make sense. It's not for everyone. But the best thing that you can do is just check if it is right for you, because yes, you are saving on your energy bills, and things like that. But ultimately, you are reducing the carbon footprint. You are contributing to your life as a citizen, and in your community. So that's my take on it, at least, anyway.
Absolutely. And I think just looking forwards, when you look at the binding climate change commitments that the UK has, and we do have to do something to decarbonize our homes, and having renewables is a way to do that. And I think that more people, I can't imagine a situation where energy prices are going to roll back. We've gone through the pain, and I think we'll keep with that. But it's more people are going to start on this journey, and it's brilliant that there are organisations like HIES Consumer Code and like Segen collaborating to bring quality installers to consumers, so that we can get this work done right first time, which I think is really important. So our time is up. That time has absolutely flown by, and I just want to say, on behalf of our listeners today, thank you so much to Jonathon and Jack for sharing your insights today and your experience and expertise. As you both have said, collaboration is key to overcoming some of the challenges that we see in the solar industry, but also for driving forward innovation and attracting new entrants in, and also giving confidence, hopefully, to some heating engineers who might be listening thinking, Are they ready to start taking the step to start thinking about renewables? Yes, there are organisations there ready to help, and just reach out your hand, I would say, and take that help. And to our listeners, thank you so much to you for tuning in, for subscribing to this podcast via Apple Podcasts, Spotify or Google Podcasts, or even watching us on YouTube. We do appreciate you joining us. Please like and share this episode, and don't forget to subscribe. And hopefully you found that this episode has shed some light on the exciting opportunities that are available in the solar energy industry. As I say, remember to like and subscribe our podcast for more discussions like this. Thank you again to our sponsors, HIES Consumer Code. This is me, your host, Anna Scothan, signing off for today. But please do stay tuned for our next episode. And remember, together, by collaboration, we can make a difference.